Hey, so today I wanted to talk about one of my biggest gripes with role-playing games and like Dungeons and Dragons, especially when I started out, and especially when I started out trying to have my own custom campaigns and my own custom storylines. It's a problem that I like to call monster manual driven storytelling, and I think this is a pitfall that like a lot of new dungeon masters fall into at the very beginning, and this is why you have these memes where like the first level party is going to fight rats and stuff. And I think what's funny is that Wizards of the Coast has realized that through editions that the first level parties are fighting rats, and they tried to fix this by adding these other monsters to their monster manuals. And it ended, and because these monsters were now so wildly out of the world for like any like low level campaign, unless you really wanted to like marry yourself to like a particular concept for your campaign, that the players could just not use them. It's been very frustrating for me when I was like flipping through a manual trying to find like some next encounters, and I just keep seeing like all these like we'll get into this in a minute, but because I've already flipped through like the D&D 5 monster manual to find some examples. Like the first one, like you just see these creatures. You can't really justify them being there in the first level, like sort of like a tavern setting. It's cool that they are in the game because you can use them at later levels, like when your characters are level 3 and level 4, you can still pull up these new creatures of lower levels. But when you're starting the campaign, it's a bit overwhelming to find something unique that would also fit with the story that you're trying to tell. So, as an example for this, I'm just going to say that, like, let's say I want to have this like a very simple generic story of my that's like, but kind of an open-ended one where like I have my party that's uh, being paid to go and infiltrate a castle of like some rich merchant guy and like steal some of his things, right? And I don't really want them to fight like rats and like the same guards and have the same encounter all over again. So I'm looking through the manual and I'm going to see what I'm trying to find, what I can find here. So actually, this is like the second time I'm recording this video because I tried recording once when I originally got the D&D 5 Master Manual, and it kind of fell off my timeline. I just had work to do and stuff, and then I tried recording this anew, and I realized that just doing this back and forth was like trying to show you flip a book on webcam. It's hard. So my book is actually somewhere in the closet right now, so I didn't even bother to get it out for this second video. What I'm going to do now is just I got this PDF, and it's just much faster to like screen share, screen capture to prove my point. So now the big problem is, and I still think that Wizards of the Coast hasn't fixed it in their 5th edition monster manual, is that a lot of these characters that we will see, like these monsters, they don't really follow up upon. It's very hard. So like let's do I'm going to like search, and let's see, I'm just going to like quickly search with something challenge 1 to real. So the first thing we find was a challenge 1/4. So this is actually stat wise a very good monster to have for a first party encounter, because you can put 4 of them, right? And look at this. This is a humanoid eagle. So when like if you've never seen this, right? If you just like, I want to have a campaign, it's a very, very low probability that you would, like, while defining the story in your head before you even open the book, that you would think of having humanoid eagles in your campaign. But now you're kind of open. This is nice because you're kind of open. This helps your creativity because you opened a book. You see this like lore on the right side. They're like enemies of elemental evil, whatever. You can use this. But then I'm like, well, first, how do I justify this being in a castle, right? Well, I can, but like, let's say that this is in a castle because cargo, there's fallen enemies, invaders, whatever. Like, it's a guard. It's a guest or a guard or whatever. It was summoned by a wizard, but then unless it's a very generic reason by like, all right, that it was summoned or like by a wizard or something. Well, do they summon or are they summoned? It doesn't really matter. Like, it's there. So it's then you have a question: am I going to follow up on this type of creature again? Are we going to see another humanoid eagle? Because like, this is like a whole race that you're just gonna bring to your story. You can just like drop it. Like, if you just drop it immediately, then it's like your world will feel less coherent, like, with itself. So when you bring in any of these like exotic creatures, you have to think like, do I like them enough for them to be in the story for this amount of time? And while you're doing this, and now you're in this loop thinking, all right, well, how do I build my story about these like humanoid eagles or whatever I find next? And now the story that you actually wanted to tell at the very beginning is taking a backseat, essentially, right? Because, well, I wanted to tell a story about this like heist from a castle, but all I can pick are humanoid. Well, obviously not all you can pick. We're gonna go through this more, but I just wanted to show you the general field. All right, so let's continue. All right, well, I can't use Aboleth. It's challenge 10, challenge 10, challenge 16, challenge 1. You can use animated armor in your castle as a guard. That's fine. That makes sense, right? A flying sword, fine. A behir, 11, 13. A death tyrant. That's a. All right. So this is another one of those. This is actually one of the better examples of what you can use at the lower levels that I found in this book. It's are these blights? Because if you have a campaign set, not a campaign, but like if you'll have an adventure set in like a swamp or a forest, you can use these blights because there's like 3 different kinds of them, so you can build a varied encounter. And this is another problem of like building varied encounters. Like, who am I going to pair this with? Like, if you have these like blights, right? Well, at least I can have like, well, 2 twig blights, 1 needle blight, 1 wine blight. You know, that's a kind of a varied encounter. Like, one of them, they kind of have different attacks. You know, this is different. Like, but the eagle humanoids, they, you know, you can't really fit them in anything. So a bugbear is a classic, of course. A twig blights. Let's see what else can we do. A bullywug. Essentially, you have to have an aquatic campaign, sort of, or again like a swamp thing, you know, for the field to be there. So let's just go quickly through this because I want to bring this to like my point, essentially. That unless actually demons are very abundant in this game, in Dungeons and Dragons manual, so like demons are always a safe bet. Like, you can always bring a demon because you can build the entire campaign. There's always a demon for your level, but if it's just like demons are not something that you really want in your campaign because of like the story that you want to tell. Again, it's like you're kind of skipping a good portion of the book. So anyways, let's continue trying to find something for my castle, right? For my castle adventures. So a bronze dragon obviously is not gonna cut it. Actually, I think we can skip the entire dragon, but a dryad you can justify, but again, it has to be then its own thing. Like, you can have a bolt with like portals. Well, okay, a dryad's gonna be hard, but actually I was very surprised that Dwergar are challenge 1 because they were kind of badass in like the Drizzt books. So like, you would not say that like a Dwergar that lived underground with like, you know, just like this really hostile environment in the Underdark is gonna be a challenge 1 at the same level that like 4 of these random flying swords. It's like, But I see why, because again, they are trying to fix this problem that you don't have something to use, but they are fixing it wrong in the sense of, well, look how long I have to click. I'm still finding this, like, everything is like over level 10, and I think this is another problem for, like, these monster manuals have this very disproportionate representation of monsters for different levels. Like, most people that I played with and that I know that play up to like mid-level. Like 11th level in D&D is usually like the sweet spot where you want to end your campaign, because like at some point, if you're like 14th level, you're this kind of an overpower. You're essentially like getting to this like godhood kind of power. Not really godhood, but let's say like you're essentially quite, like if you're a wizard, you're essentially quite superhuman at this point. But the social interactions that you can have in a higher level campaign are becoming smaller, because you're not going to be asked. You can be asked, but again, it's not going to be a fun challenge. If your 14th level mage is asked to, you know, like, hey, my daughter has been kidnapped by like some wild, like swamp hag from across the bog, and you can be like a fireball the entire swamp. I don't care, but it becomes harder. So I think that's where the game is kind of these role-playing games are kind of having issues, is like with like storytelling, is like these like higher level campaigns. So if I were writing a monster manual, I would try to like concentrate my attention of putting the most creatures in like these like lower levels, because another problem, which if you think about it, is like a challenge rating 1 creature you can use for a long time. You can use a challenge rating 1 creature in like campaign up to probably like level 5, because even your 5th level party can still have they can still fight a bunch of these challenge rating 1 creatures. Like if you have a 5th level party, they can fight 5 dwergars, right? You can fight 5 ghouls. You can still use those creatures. Like you can't. It doesn't work in the other direction, right? So like the reasons to use 15 level creatures are less than the 1st level creatures. That makes sense. So I would really like to have more. Less like giants and more like different varieties of like these like urban fantasy setting kind of creatures that you can use. Gnolls are actually really good in this book, because again they give you like a set of them. You can populate the entire dungeon. You can then sidetrack it to like exploring the dungeon deeper. So that having like a bunch of gnolls, that kind of fills the entire niche. Okay, but we're still trying to find something that would work for my like for my city heist sort of thing, right? A hippogriff, like how? So all these creatures are very cool and they look very cool at like paper, but while you're flipping through them, you realize that like at some point kobolds and like Squatoa and lizard folk are going to be your best bets if you want to have your own story. So how do you fix this? So you essentially have these 2 approaches, right? So the first one, you can invent your own creatures from scratch, which works great if you have some experience. If you don't have any experience, this can backfire a lot, because it's very hard to build a balanced encounter if you're just using your own creatures, and essentially not having balanced encounters is not fun, right? Because there's either going to be no challenge or too much challenge, and like nobody wants to die at the 1st level to like a guard in a castle. So what you really should do is take at least what I would do, right, is I would go open a random creature. Like I would open this quadrone. What is this? Okay. Let's find something nicer to look at. I would take a Myconid adult, right? A Myconid is like, well, it's hard to justify it having in the urban setting, but it might have like cool actions. Look at this. This is like pacifying spores, report spores. Like this is a fun creature to fight, but I can't put it in my campaign because it doesn't fit. So what do you do? You essentially just change the lore entirely. You keep the stats, and what you can do is, if you like that eagle guy from the very beginning, that one, the eagle humanoid, you essentially turn this mechanid adult into another one of those eagle humanoids. But you change the flavor text, right? So any kind of a melee attack can be fluffed into anything, into a sword. You can say that it's a special weapon that they have. That's just how their muscles work. So you can, like any kind of melee attacks, you can change the fluff text easily. Pacifying spores, really. The mechanid ejects spores at one creature it can see within 5 feet. The target must succeed on a DC 11 Constitution saving throw or be stunned for 1 minute. So what you do here is, instead of having a mechanid with pacifying spores, you might have your eagle humanoid. I can't remember the name. That has like these pouches of just like I don't know what does it actually do. I see it's of some powder that does the same effect, right? So just by changing the fluff text a bit, you now have a bigger variety of what kind of creatures your characters are fighting. So how I would recommend you reading any monster manual, really, if you want to build like interesting encounters for your characters, is you split your, like cognitively, you split what you learn in like 2 separate parts, right? The first thing you read the monster manual for is the lore, because I want to be able like to have in my mind these creatures that are like, hey, this is like, what is this? A pixie. All right, a pixie is like, I can read the monster manual to know what a pixie is, but let's say I'm like purple worm. Okay, there's not much gonna be a lore in that one, right? Let's find Rakshas. This is a good example, right? So like, it's kind of level 13, but still, the point is like, you're reading the monster manual. You're like, well, now I learned that like these Rakshasas are a thing that I can use in my campaigns. And then as a second part of your experience with the monster manual are the stat blocks, but totally should be the stat blocks, but totally divorced from their actual lore, right? So like, you're like, okay, I know Rakshasas exist. I want to build an adventure with Rakshasas. I see there's only one, but I like the concept. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the other monsters that fit the challenge rating that I want to achieve, and I will spend like 5 minutes to try and convincingly turn them into this lore of Rakshasas. And this is how, now if you want to have your encounter in like you're like stealing and sneaking through the castle and seeing something, now and let's say you encounter guards. Now instead of your guards, everybody being like a first level human fighter, whatever generic thing, you're like, hey, this one guard is actually has the power of, has a long spear, and he's actually the stat log of Sahwagin, right? So he can do like these multi attacks with the spears. Instead of a bite, he has like the sidearm that he attacks you with, like a side dagger that does this damage. Again, some of your players might complain that like, well, it's kind of weird that like this dagger that the other guard has suddenly does a has a +3 to hit. Okay, this is obviously a bad example because the challenge rating of this one too, so it's fine. It's fine. So +3 to hit, and it's kind of different, but you can always fluff text justify it that this is just this one guard. It just has it's like his feat, essentially, that he can do this one thing, he trained for it. And at least when I was using this kind of trick to like bring more challenge into my campaigns, where I could still have player characters fighting like guards and humans and thieves and stuff, they would in reality be fighting all these kinds of stat block creatures that didn't fit thematically into the campaign. I never heard anyone really complain about this. So like, your players will not complain about fighting different mechanics, as long as it's not like unfair, unless it's not like, you know, a sidearm that like does triple damage. They're not going to complain about that. So this is essentially what is one of the biggest tricks that I used, and I think most of people use it later on when they're playing, you know, the same campaign, not the same campaign, but if you play with the same people again and again, and especially if your players enjoy like a particular type of campaign. So usually I played in like a very urban setting, and it's very hard to bring like half of these cool creatures from the monster manuals that you would find. Like, you can't bring, okay, the Andrew Sphinx is like, you can't really bring, as pride you can, but this into like a generic setting that you would have in a city, unless you really like are really prepared to like spend at least one adventure like exploring this Strike Queen, because, you know, it's not a thing that would randomly try to mug you on the street, right? And then even if it was a thing that tried to randomly mug you on the street, you would still want to follow up, like, what did I just see? But instead, you just change the floor a bit, and bam, you have varied encounters. And I think it also helps you to understand better like how the stat blocks really work, in that once you once you no longer consider the stat block fluff text to be the actual part of the stat block, it helps you later to mix and match those things. This is a more dangerous thing, but you can mix and match like different attacks slightly, and then that helps you define your own creatures later on, and like, you know, for your own campaigns, like just bring something more exciting. And if you read the master manual for the lore itself, then other thing that's good is that you won't be skipping things that I would not use anymore. So now, if I see that, okay, the Strike Queen is like only challenge 1, but now my party is like level 7, so it's not really interesting to me anymore because I can't really use it. But you would still read the lore, and you would be like, hey, like if I like the lore, I will pick a different creature and apply the stats block and say it's a Strike Queen and have an adventure that way. So this is your takeaway from this is the monster manual, in at least in my opinion, is not really fixed yet in D&D 5. It still has the same issues I had in D&D 4 Wizard, in that it's still hard to bring them to the campaign. And then you can fix this by applying some creativity, and the easiest one is to mix and match the lore with the stat blocks to satisfy the campaign you're trying to, you know, to satisfy essentially your needs for the campaign. All right, so I hope this was interesting, and see you next time.